I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. Our guest today is Janet the Director of Culture and Tourism, or Tourism and Culture?
Culture and Tourism.
Culture and Tourism for the town of Nantucket.
Hi, Dan.
How are you? Welcome.
I'm great.
This
Thank
is
you.
the first time you've been here in your new role.
In my new hat, yes.
Yes. What's going on in the world of culture and tourism these days?
Well, we had a booming stroll weekend. We had about 50% more visitors this year than we did last year, which I think was reflected across the board. In business, seemed to have a good weekend, and I think the
How many of those just come over for the day? Do you have any sense?
Oh, I think of the 10,000 that came, probably 7,500.
Yeah.
I don't know how many are on those boats. That's probably a lot for that, but there were a lot of day trippers.
Mm-hmm.
All the boats were full coming over and going back
yeah.
Saturday.
Well, that's good. Otherwise, it's probably pretty quiet.
It's very, very, very quiet. We're
When did you start the job?
August 6th.
Okay.
Or 7th.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then you're busy. Now it's pretty quiet, right?
Yeah, we had seasonal staff up until Sunday, and now it's just David Sharp and me holding down the fort. So it's pretty quiet. We're doing a giveaway. Anybody who comes in gets a free canvas 4th of July tote bag. Better if
while they last.
While they last. Better if you ask us a question. Even better if we can answer it.
How are the inquiries that come in to you now very similar to the ones that came to the Chamber of Commerce? I would assume they're pretty much.
They're pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I found that when I was in the other job as well. People ask us more about lodging than they did at the chamber. Yeah. Well, of course, at the visitor center, I can talk about anybody doing, and at the chamber, I can only talk about members.
Right.
So we have a broader group to support now than previously.
All right. Well, let's talk about what's happening next. One of the things you're involved in is the planning for what is now called Harbor Square, I guess.
Harbor Place.
Harbor Place used to be Wilkes Square.
Wilkes Square, yes.
I don't know what happened to poor Mr. Wilkes, but
his monument's still there. It makes a great trivia question.
But anyway, how did you get involved in that, and what is your role going to be going forward, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, it's a complicated story, but let's say that the owners group, the 4 owners who own that property in that where the Stop and Shop and the oil tanks are and all of that, have been working together for a couple of years, and they're at the point where they wanted to start talking about planning for an intermodal transportation center, which would have buses, taxis, tour groups, the tour vans, as well as covered parking, a parking garage.
Who are the 4 owners? National Grid, New England Development, the old Beinecke, whoever that is.
Right. That predates me, but I think I know who you're talking about. And
which still owns the parking lot and the building where the Stop and Shop is.
Right.
Or part of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And then who's the 4th? Harbor Fuel?
Well, it could be. They're moving, though. That got decided the other night.
Right.
I don't remember who the 4th one is.
Okay.
But that's being all engineered, as it were, by Dave Fredericks. He's their representative. So that group is paying for a consultant, Desmond, out of Boston, whose primary focus is on this kind of intermodal and parking management system, an architectural firm that does that. So there was an RFP sent out for that in the fall.
By them, not by the town.
Yeah, but the town reviewed them.
Yeah.
This is before my arrival. Once they were hired and the contract is with the town, then there was a need for someone to manage the communications and the public outreach side of that. I asked to be involved with it because I think that kind of intermodal facility and that site in particular is critical to visitors and residents, and I see that as part of my job is to not only serve the visitors, but to serve the people who serve the visitors.
It also becomes more important as we go to some year-round service for the
bus service. Yeah, absolutely. And it could be a site where in the models that I've seen Dave present over the last couple of years, I saw this in my chamber role. It could be a place where ferry tickets were sold. It could be a visitor services kiosk there. As well as other bicycle rentals, the whole idea that it really could be better pedestrian service, better bike service, better access to picking people up.
Is there any talk in this process about improving the traffic flow to the High Line?
I think so, over the 10-year thing, from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
The role that I have right now is to sort of staff the work group that's formed, which is a couple of members of the Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, Planning Board. Paula Leary from the NERDA is on there as well, and the planning office is on there as well. So their first meeting is coming up on the 19th, and Desmond is going to present its first basic design. I spent much of November on this project getting them data, transportation data. So I got data from the airport, both in terms of emplanements and parking, NERDA data, how many taxi services there are, tour operators, schedules, all stuff that they put into some big fancy machine up there, like a meat grinder.
Database,
right. And it comes out, and they know the frequency of use. They can analyze that kind of stuff. So there'll be that presentation, a work plan that comes up, and then I will be talking about some initial ideas about outreach to let the community know what the plans are that are coming forward.
What's going to drive that process? I mean, is it the need for this facility? Is it the need for parking? Is it the need for more commercial space? Is it the need for, or is it the fact that now the space is just available because Harbor Fuel's moving? Yeah. Presumably National Grid is amenable to other uses of its property, whether it owns the property or not. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a whole domino thing going on here. I think the Harbor Fuel approval at the board meeting the other night is certainly a huge domino in clearing up that property. I know that the other 3 owners have been involved with looking at some plans for how to restructure that. Winthrop, that was the one.
They're the ones who own the Stop and Shop building and the parking lot.
The plans that Dave was taking around showing people last year at different groups shows a different layout for that area that would improve traffic and moving through there. There are already some improvements being made now to the sidewalks by the town. So there's an opportunity to commercially develop that way so that it is a better look and feel than a tank farm and a couple of vacant lots and the crowdedness of the craziness that happens every time a boat comes in that area. So I think that's a driver, is the opportunity to do more commercial development. I mean, we certainly see parking as an issue. Tangential to this, and certainly overlapping in some respects, is the board's decision to look at a paid parking program for town, and there's been a lot of, so they're looking into hiring a consultant to look at that as well, simultaneously. And most communities that do this, I've looked at Bar Harbor, Newburyport, Plymouth, are looking at both options at the same time. And I'll say that I haven't seen, in my thumbnail analysis, I haven't seen one that has, the first time they did it right. There have to be adjustments whenever, one of these things comes into life, because you're changing human behavior. Right. And that always takes a bit of poke here, poke there. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole nother issue, actually. It's important. It all goes together with what you're trying to do down there at Harbor Place. But, I mean, there are other issues like such painting little things on the curbs so people know where the parking spaces are, and you don't have people taking 3 spaces.
Right, and if you use technology to measure how long someone's staying in a place, then you have to do some kind of identification of what a parking space is.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that to Mike Burns to figure out.
Well, that's what the airport's done, with its new parking.
Oh, is that right? Has those little digital
each parking space is numbered.
Oh, cool.
It's not anything subtle. It's painted in the middle of the spot.
Right. Yeah.
So when you know what your space is, and if you have to pay to park, you go enter it in the machine, and but if you don't, it catches you.
Yeah. Actually, that was the most frequent question we got at the airport last year, was, how do I park? So I don't anticipate it's going to be an easy transition, but it may well be a necessary one for economic development, downtown business opportunity and like.
One of the issues, obviously, is the downtown business climate, and particularly off-season. Is that? I assume that's being factored into some of these discussions.
Yeah, I haven't seen the full. I mean, there was a motion by the board, and which I have seen, that talked about the need to look at all those parameters, seasonality as well. So I would suspect that there would be different rules at different times, as there are now. The signs just change downtown from 1 hour parking to 2 hour parking. It magically happens overnight.
Right.
how that, I don't know how they do that, but elves are doing it.
Elves.
Yeah. So when we're already used to that, the rules changing, so the rules would probably change again. And in fact, parking really isn't free. We pay for it with something called a parking ticket now when you're downtown. So this is a way to kind of regulate, monitor the cash flow overall.
And well, also, and to provide some discipline to the people who are parking there.
Yes. Yes.
But you do have people who park there who need their cars for their businesses and so forth. So there's a lot to figure out.
Yeah, in the outreach program, we'll attempt to talk to those folks, not just in a big forum, but to try to get that at them and get the feedback for the purposes of coming up with the best possible solutions.
One of the challenges for quote economic development downtown is that Islanders just don't go downtown. You know, they avoid it like the plague in the summertime, and they will go maybe to the library or something, occasionally, or the movie theaters, excuse me, but that's going to be overcoming that mindset is going to be hard in terms of the challenges that are presented to any other new businesses down there.
And this might help to ease the flow. I mean, I've happened to stumble upon the textbook on parking as I started this research. There is one by a guy named Shoup. I showed it to Mike Burns the other day because, I read that in college. So I'm a little late, but at least I got the right book. And it talks about, you have an 85% rate so that when you're not circulating as much, and that's one of the hidden costs of parking is the congestion that happens because people are looking for a spot.
Right.
And if you're at 85%, then there should be one space per block. It's fascinating statistical analysis and science about it. So if that were true, then you could
Does that factor in cobblestones?
I don't think so. I think it cobblestones in Plymouth, I think. Newburyport does. So that, if people could expect that there would be a spot, then they might be more willing to come into town. I think parking is not the only limiting factor to coming into town in the summer, but I think it's certainly the one that's most vocal.
Well, but if you look at Main Street and how the businesses have changed on Main Street, and there used to be the Sports Locker. Before that, way back when, there was Butner's, which was sort of a mini little department store, and a number of other sort of businesses that had things people needed. Yeah. And now, of course, they can get them all over the place off island. Right. And that's part of the problem. So it will be interesting to see how this unfolds in terms of economic development.
And how people shop. I know some folks in my neighborhood in Noshop who shop at a local establishment downtown online. They don't even go into town. But they can get everything they want by clicking a few buttons from the comfort of their home.
From a downtown Nantucket business.
From a downtown Nantucket business.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So the challenge.
I would have never thought of that.
The challenge that we had last year at the chamber was how do you give people red tickets when they do that? So I don't know if they figured that out. That's their problem.
That's the buyer's
If you really want the red ticket, you'll figure out how to get it.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else is on your platter from a culture standpoint?
Well, we have the Nantucket Cultural District. It's now in about its third year in January, celebrates its third anniversary. It's still emerging as what it is, what kind of critter it is, and what we do with it. I've seen a half a dozen of those in my travels, both at the Chamber and since I've taken this job. And they vary from having a capital project problem, where they've got a lot of land or a lot of warehoused buildings, to a marketing problem and how you use it to promote the development of an area. I've been working with Barbara Elder. We farm out the management of the cultural district to the Arts Council, and she and I have frequent talks about how to bring more business into that. It's obvious who the cultural partners are. Right. And they play together really, really well, often collaborate on programming. But what we really need to do is to figure out how to make it a better, the businesses rise on that tide as well. So we do something called a convening, which is one of these Mass Cultural Commission words. Convene. So we're going to convene in April, and we're telling each of the cultural organizations to bring a business partner, so we can start figuring out how some of those connections. Because I don't think it's enough to say, if you bring your ticket to the Dreamland from Queequegs, you get 10% off. It ought to be if you bring your ticket from the Dreamland to Queequegs, so that it goes both ways, in order so that there's a benefit to partners on both sides. So we'll see how that happens. Some of that's a pretty radical notion.
Yeah, well, it's worth putting it out on the table, seeing you can get somebody to bite.
Yeah. So there's that. Whenever I hear about an idea, about a cultural opportunity, I try to jump on it and to promote it and push it forward. I would like to see more of our cultural organizations doing things in January, February, March.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there any movement afoot to have this work in the off season?
Because I really think that's where we should put our energies. Is as I said earlier, my job is to help take care of the visitors, but it's also to take care of the people who take care of the visitors, us. And so I would like to see something like a Winterfest that happened between mid-January and mid-March, with each of those organizations doing something for families, for residents in that time period, and finding some funds if they need that to do that, or just getting it on the books to
or getting a partnership with a local hotel or something that would help promote it and be good for them and good for the cultural institutions.
Yeah. Because we've got rich resources in that area, and they've got plenty to do, and they work really, really hard. And I need them to work a little bit harder.
They did not take the winter off.
Exactly. I still, I've been here almost 12 years, and the notion of taking the winter off, maybe because I was an academic, and that's like when you work.
Right. Take the summer off.
Gave that up.
Well, Janet, thank you. And come back and keep us posted on what is happening with this Harbor Place plan, because I think it's important for everybody to be up to speed on it. And
this would be a great spot to do that.
Super. Thank you, Janet.
Thanks, Dan. See you.